everyone. I'm Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs and the host of our weekly live video series called Centaur Stage. We're in the middle of our second season, all about the magic of teams, what makes teams cohesive, high-performing, and happy. And we've structured the season over 4 chapters. This chapter that we're working on this week is all about, how to build teams. And then our chapter from the first 4 episodes was all about team dynamics. We started this chapter with Jonathan Yeo last week, who told us all about how to build diverse and inclusive teams. We're going to continue to learn about how to build teams by deep diving into recruitment. We want to know, how do we recruit the right talent? How do we make sure we're getting the right skills, but also the right culture fit? We may want to settle the debate on which one matters more. And this is all really important because the foundation of a team is what eventually will contribute to making it more cohesive, happy, and high-performing. So within this chapter, myself and some incredible guests will go live on LinkedIn every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. UAE time. We'll share insights, experiences, perspectives, and hopefully you'll join us for our upcoming episodes. And you can catch up on our older ones in my feed, actually. And so before we begin, as always, please do give us a like. Tell us where you're joining us from. Both Sonal and I will be on the lookout for your comments and your questions. And I'll try to make sure that Sonal answers as many questions as possible in the time that we have. So let me introduce Sonal. Our guest today is Sonal Bahl. She's a career strategist and founder of Supercharge. She's an experienced HR director and a career strategist living in Belgium. She's originally from India, but she's worked and lived in India, in Uruguay, in Chile, and in France. And after nearly 2 decades in HR, screening over 250,000 resumes and conducting over 5,000 interviews in 3 continents, where she helped recruit, build, and evolve highly talented teams. She has experience working with large companies like GE, PwC, as well as mid-sized family-owned firms and startups. Sonal helps people by offering authentic advice on how they can have a career they actually love. She'll give you that extra edge you need to land the job that you want, get promoted, or improve your happiness at work. She's also the creator and host of How I Got Hired, a top-rated career podcast in multiple countries. And last but not least, Sonal has an MBA from INSEAD, currently ranked #1 program in Europe and top 2 globally, my alma mater too. She speaks English, Hindi, Spanish, and French fluently. Sonal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Happy to be back.
Yes, Sonal was our guest in our first ever Cosmic Conference back in July 2020, where we had a really great debate about whether remote work was better or worse for work-life balance, if I remember correctly. Today's topic, as I said, is all about the recruitment process, how to build strong and happy teams by hiring the right people into them. We want to talk about everything from assessing candidate skills to how you can tell if they're going to be a good culture fit. What is the right balance between those 2 aspects? Of course, it seems to us like skill is the most obvious thing to look for, but actually it could get complicated to validate that people have the skills they say they do. And how about soft skills? It's also important. Yeah, absolutely. It's also important for us to make sure that we hire people that at least share some of the foundational values or work methods of the team. And so recruitment isn't as simple as it sounds, and it has a really, potential to have a really great positive or a really great negative effect on teams. And so let's deep dive with Sonal on how we can do that. So before we go to the debate of skills and culture, Sonal, let's start by just looking at what makes a good kind of hiring process and what it takes to be a good hiring manager in a team. From your experience and your knowledge, just off the bat, what would you say are the most important things to keep in mind as elements of the recruitment process?
I think the first and foremost thing is to recognize the fact that you're human and you're going to have biases at every step of the way. It's not possible to not have that. So there's a lot of pressure on hiring managers and recruitment. Recruitment gets a very bad rap. On LinkedIn, you see a lot of like hate and venting messages. At the end of the day, it's like, okay, what do you want? And the more focused you are on the position, like what do I want about the position, and the more open-minded you are about who can fill that position in, that is easier said than done, Marilyn. We've all been there in hiring, and we do have certain preconceived notions, and the biases will be there at every step of the way. No, I was expecting, I would love maybe 20 more years experience, or 40 more years, or in this particular sector, or you gotta like peel back the onion a little bit and say, is that really, really necessary? Because it's just like finding a date, to go out. You're not a perfect person. So why does that person have to meet like 20 criteria, tall and educated from Harvard and this? I'm like, really? Yeah. I mean, does that mean you're also a great catch? We're all flawed. So the more we kind of recognize the humanity side of things, I think the better the experience for everyone.
I think that's really beautiful advice, actually. There tends to be this kind of like imbalanced relationship between, usually, a perceived imbalance between the people interviewing and those coming to an interview. But I think, to your point, an interview is an occasion for both parties to decide if they like each other. How do you make sure that, at least on the side of the people interviewing, and then maybe you'll tell us about the interviewees, but how do you make sure that you have the right skills when you're interviewing? What's on the checklist to say, like, on the one hand, maintain humanity and compassion. You and your company are not flawless, so make sure that you treat people with the same approach. But what are some other kind of pointers that
Yeah.
you give to people on the interviewing side, and then tell us the same about what you give people on the being interviewed?
Yeah. So just to sort of go deeper in that for half a second, half a minute, you talked about this. And I think one thing that COVID has accelerated is the fact, like, unlike 2020, 2021, hiring is insane. One of the best yardsticks to understand why is hiring, what's really going on, is the demand for recruiters has gone up. Insane volumes. Like, recruiters are now, I read somewhere, even more in demand than software engineers. So that tells you something, right? So the balance has shifted big time. And it's not just about why should we hire you, it's also for them, like, what's your employer value proposition, your EVP? Like, why should I choose you, right? And it's not arrogant on either side. So some of the things that I think I'll share are from a point of view of mistakes, because if you can learn not to do those, that's already a really, really great start. I think the very first thing is, keep in mind that as a human being, there will be mistakes. So it's okay. The two most obvious mistakes are hiring the wrong person, which is the alpha error, and the beta error, which is rejecting the right person. Both are painful, but if you had to maybe minimize one, and it would, I would say, avoid hiring the wrong person. There is nothing more expensive. And for, by the way, for small business owners, we are told again and again, there's nothing more expensive and painful than letting the wrong person give you their money. Hiring the wrong client, letting the wrong client hire you. It's the same with companies. Getting the wrong person in, it's like that bad apple analogy, and then it affects everyone. So that's kind of obvious, right? But the second thing I want to say is, the whole judging the book by its cover, and we talked about biases, etc. Just the sooner you forget about it, the better. Resume is one side of the story. The cover letter is one side of the story. Interview is only one side of the story. It is the one that is given the most amount of attention. There is decisions made on emotion, etc. It is one of the most imperfect ways to judge someone, but it is what it is. We're not going to, I'm a pragmatist, Marilyn. I don't want to talk too much about how it should be, but keep in mind it's not a perfect process. So do not judge, because your perception could be something. The third thing is, the days of top down. I interviewed a very interesting gentleman in the LinkedIn editor in chief of LinkedIn News. He was on my podcast, and he's like, he came from a command and control background, and he had to unlearn that when he was recruiting people. And it was a lot more consensus driven, right? Meet one or two people on my team. I would like you to, I would like to know if they can work with you, right? Do they like each other, etc. So there's one extreme which is top down. The other extreme can be, by the way, and I've seen this a lot, is the fear. So let's do 12 rounds of interviews because we want to be absolutely sure this is the right person. By the way, I forgot to say this. I've seen some of the caliber of like your past guests. Today, I've been like, I have a little bit imposter syndrome. We're not talking from academics and research. This is just street advice, like on the ground as a practitioner, as a person who's, I'm putting on my like recruiter hat, but also my hiring manager hat because I've done a lot of hiring like for my team, but also like career coach and podcast host because you listen to you, I'm sure you know because you have your podcast, you learn so much from guests, like direct learning from guests. So that be careful that it's not top down and that it's not completely like 15 rounds of interviews. You want a really good balance. And the last one is get rid of those but questions. The but questions are boring, unoriginal, traditional. Where do you
Like,
see
where do
yourself?
you see yourself in 5
Where do you
years?
see yourself in 5 years? Dude, I don't know where I'm having lunch tomorrow. You want to know what I'm doing 5 years from now? Like, does the company know what they're doing 5 years from now? Who
Usually
are we
not.
kidding? Who are we kidding? They say something on the report and then there's a different reality on the ground. So it's like, get rid of those, focus more on like, understand where their motivation comes from, where their behavior comes from, right? So behavioral questions are a lot more. Firstly, you can't practice those. You can't cheat, and not necessarily a right answer or a wrong answer. You understand tendencies. That's a little bit better according to me. So things like tell me your greatest weakness, or tell me about yourself. I mean, just there are interview books from 50 years ago. Throw them in the bin. That's where they belong. They helped maybe for half a century, and it's time for a different way of having those conversations. The sooner they can start, the better.
That's really great advice. And what kind of behavioral question would you advise? Is it like give people a scenario and then ask them how they would react? Is it to have them describe a specific moment
I'm
in
I'm
their career?
smiling because I saw something on Instagram this morning, and it said if you want to know a person's true character, is see how they act when they have to what is the word, um
Unwrap,
untangle
untangle.
untangle Christmas lights from last year. And my husband
Oh my
was putting
God.
up the tree, and they it was the worst tangle I've ever seen. So there's something about problems and failures and mistakes, and the deeper we can go in there, the better to understand. Like, so tell me about a time when things didn't really go your way.
Yeah.
So the answer will always try to show that they are the hero of the conversation. So the job of the interviewer is to be like, oh yeah, so tell me more about like what happened. So what happened is one thing. That's 20% of the answer. The remaining 80%, you need to see how did they react? What is the choice of words they are using? Are they, blaming? Is it I versus we? You get that. And our instincts are usually spot on. So the more practice you have as an interviewer, the more you kind of are able to go past the fluff and
Right.
go into what really matters
I think
to
that's
you.
a really great point. And listen, you mentioned earlier that like interviews is only one of the tools available in our arsenal. We have a question from the audience here. Billy says, what about CV references? Are they valuable? And I'd add to that, like, what are the other tools that you would kind of recommend people think about when they're setting up that interview process, besides just interviewing people?
When you say CV references, I'm guessing what you mean is like a referral, right? Someone vouches for you.
Yeah.
It helps. It helps a lot. Now that if that person who vouches for you already works in that company, I think it's very powerful because that person already understands how things work. How do we get ish done? And I know someone who will enjoy that. That's a already, it's like the self selection has already been done. So I would say that's really powerful, but that's more a channel for me. It's not so much like the tools.
Mhm.
The tools, there's a very controversial one, and I find it very interesting, and that is the tests, the psychometric tests. You have people who love them and you have people who hate them. And the ones who hate them, the most of the common reasons are that we're not all robots. The ones that are behavioral, minded. There are a lot of these SHL, and you can Google them. A lot of these come up, CEB, Gartner, etc. The statistics prove, the standard deviation in the error. I'm geeking out a little bit, but the chances of making a mistake in those is actually really low. So there is evidential, like, um correlation between how you do in those tests versus future success. However, this is also very, very debatable, because the bias is removed, from all of that, etc. So what they can tell you, because it's always good to take things in a balance. And I know we're going to talk about skills, and I have something to say about that. So here it's like those type of testing, they tell you what are a person's preferences in their natural habitat, because they will ask the same question 30 times. So it's very hard to cheat on those type of tests, and you keep saying yes. So then, that's a person's preferences, that their tendency is more to do this. That kind of goes very well, it complements very well with our sort of team style and how we do things. And I have seen that. However, I would not let it substitute or color my final decision. You got to take things and, like, give a good amount
Different.
of weight to give a good amount of weightage to everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to talk about skill set next. And actually, someone in the audience, Miro, has asked a question, which is my next question. So I don't know if he's looking at my interview questions, but actually, one of the things we want to talk about today is this, skill set versus culture piece, and how do you assess both of them inside, within an interview process or a hiring process. One tool that I've always used myself, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, and Miro is asking the same question, is, he says interviews can be misleading and are also a lot about performance. What about assignments?
Okay. Can I just I want to talk about this. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the name. Omir?
Zvetomir, but his nickname
Zetomir.
is
Zetomir, listen, everything is a performance. Everything is a performance. Right now, I've put on my face, showing up here for Marilyn. I'm gonna go have a chat with a client. Everything is a performance. You want to meet a nice girl, you want to go out on a date with her. We want to put our best foot forward, particularly when stakes are high. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The thing that is wrong is when your performance is a complete, like, 180-degree opposite of what you are like in reality. Instead, what you want to do is you want to accentuate what you're already strong at. I'm talking on the other side now, as opposed to completely covering up our flaws, because actually some of the flaws are very desirable, but we don't think of them as flaws. We want to punish ourselves. Recruiting assignments are great. I've done a lot of these on the recruiting side when I was looking at, for example, like a product manager, right? Let's say they need a lot of client FaceTime. I want to know how comfortable they are. I want to know intellectually, can they wrestle with with difficult clients? How are they under pressure, etc. So I've been in that situation where they would be given an assignment on the spot, and they're given 2 hours, make a little presentation, present it in front of 4 people. I remember telling a friend of mine, and she was aghast, Marilyn. She was like, "Oh my God, how can you do that? Did you make her stand?" I was like, "Yes." That is so degrading. And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting that she said that." It wasn't degrading at all. But at the end of the day, I think that told us more about that person as a candidate, as opposed to a one-on-one interview or a resume. There is a caveat here, though. Some companies want to give assignments which are actually real business problems, and they want to get free consulting out of it, and they have actually no intention of actually hiring that person or hiring anyone. Now that's dirty, right? So you'll have all kinds of good, bad, ugly practices in the real world.
Yeah, that is not okay. Actually, so one way that we used to do assignments in my previous company. So actually, we had only a 3-step process, because, like you, I'm a really, like, this whole 12 interview thing is like, what are you filtering for? Like, my capacity to be resilient, to go through 12 different interviews. Like, it's just, I'm not sure what you filter out by doing that. Like, I would know that personally, I mean, at the risk of sounding obnoxious, I no matter how big the company is, I'm like, really, you need 12? Like, I'd rather don't pay me, come, I'll work for you for a month, and I'd rather skip the 12 interviews, you know.
Yeah.
So we used to have a 3 interview process. One was just like a technical person interviewing, just to make sure that the other person had the right skill sets, could say the right buzzwords. It's
Yeah.
stupid, but do you know the words of the industry is already
Yeah.
something. And then what we would do after that, if we liked them, is we'd give them an assignment, but it wouldn't be under pressure right now. So it would be, we would send it to them. We would give them like a short amount of time, mostly because we didn't want the interview process to take 6 months, but it would be like, oh, wait, do it for a week. And there was always this question like, oh, but what if they cheat and they get other people to help? I'm like, great. Because in real life, it's not about finishing it in 30 minutes. It's about, actually, are you able to leverage your network to help you solve problems or answer questions, even if it's within your work? And then what we would do is they would send the assignment, and then they would come to the second interview, and the second interview was a feedback interview. So actually we would go through, it would be a panel, like 2 or 3 people from the company. We would go through the assignment with them, and we'd be like, this was interesting, this was bad, this was good, we wouldn't have done this way, and kind of see how they would react to it. And so I think that when it comes to assignments, there's like different ways of doing it. And it's okay to do whatever fits well within your culture. Like, part of why we did it this way is it wasn't so much about the pressure. It was a lot about, can you do teamwork and can you take feedback? And yeah, your assignment isn't going to be perfect. We know that. We just want to know if you can progress when you're kind of guided in the right direction.
Yeah. I want to just plug here, in case anyone's interested to learn more about what Marilyn just said. She was a guest on my podcast, and it was one of my most downloaded episodes. And we talk about this in more detail, your hiring approach
True.
and how you brought people in. I just remembered that.
Me too. I
So
forgot that.
I'll
Um,
put a link of it on in your comments after the live stream.
yeah, and if you want to know what step 3 is, because it's a very controversial one, you should go and listen to Sonal's
Yes, absolutely.
podcast. So let's continue on the skill set piece here just for another minute.
Yeah.
You know, like, for example, I've always worked jobs where actually I did not have the skill set. I was always hired outside of my circle of competence. That's very personal story, but I think that in some industries we've become less and less, or even also in some cultures, I think we've become maybe less focused on the person having the exact right skill sets. We're a little bit more flexible. We're okay to bring people in from other industries. But tell us about what you think makes it really important for the skill set to be really covered by that individual, versus when it's okay to be more flexible, that that person can kind of learn on the job. You know, for one example for me is that at Cosmic Centaurs, we're very much a learning organization. So learning and upgrading our skills and developing new ideas and frameworks and decision making approaches is part of our everyday. So I'm like, if you don't already know how to do everything we do, no worries, because we're all going to be learning this together. So talk to us about, like, when do you think skill set match is a little less important, and that's, we
Yeah.
can weight it, or, you know,
Yeah,
downgrade the rating.
I think that this is a very important question, and I think, when we look at the title of our talk today, it's like, and you talked about debate when we were introducing. Um, I think the reality is that the world we live in, we like binary thinking, and we like putting people in one camp or another. The reality is a lot more boring. And unfortunately, the boring reality is not the type of reality that makes headlines. Because at the end of the day, we do need a balance in everything. Having said that, so by the way, very interesting. There's a career coach on LinkedIn, and she's very very well known, and she's got like millions of followers on like YouTube and TikTok. And she put up a post. It's her point of view, and she said that LinkedIn is more important than your resume. So half the people agreed with her, the other half completely bashed her up. The reality is we need both, right? I'm not going to get into that, but it's always like this or that. So when it comes to skills, obviously two instances where you need them. One is for those professions where you need a license to operate, right? You want to have a, I want to go to a doctor, I obviously want someone who's got the right skills. Same with a lawyer, same with an accountant, same with a pilot, same with a teacher. The teacher teaching my kids better know what he or she is doing. The other one is when the situation or the position is more high stakes, right? If I want a CFO in my company and I have a $20 million company, I want someone who's been around the block, who understands how finance works. The other type of high stakes can also be, let's say I have a business of 3 million, right? And I'm ready now to start using Facebook ads. Who am I going to hire to do my Facebook ads? I want someone who's like, my stakes are high. I'm paying that person $10,000. So I want to know someone who's been there, done that. So this is it. For me, these are the exceptions when you need a license to operate, or when the stakes are high and there's a lot like invested in it. Other than that, where does it say? I would love to read a white paper that in order to do marketing, you should have studied marketing, in order to, studied or worked in marketing before, or HR, or etc., etc. There is no such thing. So I always have thought this: hire for attitude, train for skill, always. And the world we live in, the reality is a little bit different, right? Now, I am hiring someone in my team. As a manager, people are looking at me. If that person does well, he or she makes me look good. If I have to fire that person, it's less about the person. It's more about, shucks, we made a mistake. This was not the right fit. Like, it just didn't match, right? So you want to take your time. Yes, you want to take your time. But I always think that when I've hired for attitude, it has, not sometimes, it has always worked out. Like, I need someone who can do, I remember hiring someone for treasury. She was very interested in finance and treasury. She studied like corporate communications in school and college, and she worked 2 years in communication, but she was like completely like changed. And every single person in the team thought this was a dumb idea. However, the other candidates, they were fine, but she had something extra, and that is hunger. Very hard to very hard to replicate that. So I have like um, certain answers I can think of, and we can get into it, Marilyn, if you want to, because I've also interviewed some very interesting podcast guests when I asked them what matters to you when you're
Mhm.
hiring, and they are like people who've hired hundreds of times, coming from big companies like GE or Johnson and Johnson to small, medium-sized companies, and their answers are very interesting, and you'll immediately see, is it more on the culture, more on attitude, or is it more on the skills? Like, when I say skills, I mean specifically teachable versus non,
Nice.
teachable. Like, you can learn coding, etc. Versus, I don't like the word soft, but more like power skills, life skills, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, not to use the word soft, but when we talk about attitude, I think we're talking about a lot of different things. Part of it is, I mean, especially by the way, in a distributed world where we're not seeing our colleagues every day, I think our ability to connect with others, to read the room, to be able to negotiate or influence is so much more important, in this kind of setting. How do you interview, or how do you include in the process that you can pick up on whether those skills are kind of well mastered by that person?
Yeah, I'll give you my go-to answer when I think about when I've interviewed people. I have a little acronym, and I have a thing for acronyms. So this one is called, like, literally Heplash. Like, it makes no sense as a word. HEPLASH. So H is hunger. Do you want the job, or you just kind of shopping? Interviewers can tell. E is energy, how you show up. And to go back to Zetomir's point, energy, how are you sitting, how do you talk? A lot of it, I would say 70 to 80% is delivery. It's not the content, it's delivery, right? It matters. You putting the person to sleep or what? Like, what's going on? P is potential. Yes, I think you can do the job today. What if when we grow, can you take on more responsibilities? Can you take on this project? Can you lead our team in China tomorrow? L is slightly more long term thinking. Is it one of those things you're looking at it like, what is the word? A stopgap. You're here because you want a stopgap before you go to INSEAD to do your MBA. Like, what's going on? I don't want to invest in you, because by the time you're fully functional, it's already 12 to 18 months. It takes that much time for someone to be completely autonomous. And by the way, I have in case anyone's interested, it's on my website. There are certain questions you can ask to determine each of these. So L is long term, A is attitude. Now I said attitude very kind of like flippantly. It is the glue that brings all of this together, you know. And is it an attitude of like, I'll figure it out, no problem, or what is the attitude towards when things don't go your way, because they will not go your way most of the time, right? So attitude towards that, winning mentality, as opposed to, so same learning growth mindset, etc. S is again soft skills, but it's the most understood term, in spite of me not liking the word. So that encompasses so much. Communication itself encompasses so much. How do you, written, oral, people skills, problem solving, influencing skills, persuasion skills. All of that is soft. And in HR, we say the soft stuff is the hard stuff. There's nothing soft about it. And H, ironically, the last one in Heplash is hard skills. Now, that is the one that you can teach. You can learn in a university. You can learn on the job, business acumen, MBA, etc., coding. And the funny thing is, the word hard, there's nothing hard about them. They're actually very easy to learn and to master. So, in this, I think out of seven, 6 out of 7 are related to, how the person shows up. What will they fit culturally? Will they add something to the culture?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and and I'm glad that 6 out of 7 are focused on that, because I think it's such an important part of bringing a team together and having them really kind of soar. And so, actually, we did say we were going to talk also about this culture fit side of the equation. This has been like a very popular terms, right? Like, say, hire for culture, don't hire for skills. Like, it's kind of, for me, it's great, but it's also a bit overused. We tend to use it a bit as a cliche, but I want to deep dive into what does that mean actually, right? And we do have a few questions from the audience on that as well. But first, I think, like, a lot of people say, oh, we hire for culture, but then I think the first step of hiring for culture is having a very clearly defined culture, right? And I think a lot of organizations, even the ones we work with, they're great. They're doing an amazing job. They're delivering lots of value on the market. But you ask them about their purpose and their values and the associated virtues or positive behaviors, and they don't have them, formalized or documented anywhere. So actually, we have a question here from Rhea. She says, like, when you're working on the values of your company, do you also think of questions or ways to understand if the candidates will be a good fit? Should you integrate questions around values in your interview process?
I was just going to talk about values actually, because you talked about culture. And I think culture is one of those things which is very hard to like concretify. That's not a word. To make tangible. You can have the best professors in the world come in and do studies on and like what your culture is and how you have a well defined culture. I think it's real in the real world. I think it's a bit more fluid, right? One of the things that really helps is to have values that are non negotiable. When we draw that line in the sand, we are saying this is not okay, right? So I'll give an example. So let's say integrity is very important to me in my team, in my company. And let's say I operate in a region where bribes are completely okay, and I'm not okay with that, right? Or telling a little white lie to a client once in a while, it's not a big deal, Ria, we all do it. Let's say you're somebody who says that's not okay, right? So you say integrity is a big part of my culture. Now, you can ask certain questions and you can peel the onion a little bit more to find out, have they ever, because we've all been there, right? Are they honest enough to admit? Because being a performance, the whole interview thing, we want to place our like our good side to the camera and completely hide the bad side or whatever, the dark side. um Eventually it will come out. Let's say you get the job and you put on this great performance, and 3 months later, 6 months later, like, actually it's not a fit culturally, we're not a good fit. And yes, it's an expensive mistake, but the sooner you know this, the better. So the interview time is a great time to find out where would they stand on certain real life, not role plays. Oh my gosh, I can't stand role plays, because role plays are such a joke. Like, nobody, everybody's acting, it's all a massive stage performance. But like real life scenario, something that happened last week, or let's say something is in the news, what is their view on it? The more you can extract out of them, the more you can get them to talk, the more you can be quiet, let them speak. And even if there is silence in the interview, don't feel awkward. How are they comfortable? Are they covering it up? Because sometimes when I talk too much, it's also like nervousness or whatever, which is okay. But then it's like, are you covering up something? So it is a bit of detective work, and you will never know completely 100% for sure, and that's okay. Sometimes we're not hiring robots, so it may work out, it may not work out, but work out is also something you will not know now. You'll know it down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the values piece, there are some companies that are quite, strict about integrating them in their interview process. Amazon, of course, is one of the most notable example, where they have their, I think it's 12 principles, and every question in an interview, you have to relate to one of those principles and how you've expressed that in previous experiences. I've recently started asking candidates, I give them our values, and then I say, just react to them. Tell me how you feel. Does this word bother you? Is there a situation where you express that? Can you share that with me? And I think it does two things. As I said earlier, like that, the interview process is a two-way street. I really don't think about it as like I'm screening them only. And I think that by sharing the values early on in the process, if you do end up hiring them, they know it's important. You don't have to like remember 6 months later to onboard them on the values, because it was a part of the barrier that got them into the company. And I think from a communication standpoint, it just sends a strong signal about the fact that you really care about these. And if you do join the company, you better know what they are, and you better, make sure that you're exploring how you can live them out.
And if you're interviewing with a company, that's where your homework and research comes in, because you need to know what matters to these people. And
Yeah.
if that doesn't gel with you, sometimes it's like, don't waste their time. Maybe it's more hustle, and no matter what, work around the clock. Maybe that doesn't gel with you anymore. Maybe the stage you're in your life, that's okay. There'll be another one which does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think not every company is for everybody, and that's all right. You need to find the company that, as you say, matches your current priorities and state of mind. And the sooner both of you know, the better. Absolutely. I think with this hiring for culture fit, we can also sometimes get a little bit extreme about that, right? Like we end up hiring a lot of people that are similar to each other, actually, and creating a very homogeneous organization. How do you avoid falling in that trap? We know how important diversity is to performance and innovation and interconnectedness. And at the same time, sometimes we end up just having an entire organization of people who think the exact same way. How do you make sure you hire for culture fit without falling into the trap of homogeneity? I can't pronounce this word.
Homogeneity, and also culture adds, right? And Because culture fit gets a really bad rap, and I think rightfully so. People who look like us, talk like us, sound like us, walk like us, uh, dress like us. So there's somebody who said diversity is a fact. You can see the numbers. Inclusion is a feeling, and I think culture is also a feeling, right? So one thing is diversity, which is visible: gender, age, race. And then you have invisible diversity, which is equally important. And that can be more, did you, the person come from a different background? We're a digital marketing agency. This guy used to be a cop. What? Yeah, but he's done some courses, he's got some skills, he studied, and he brings something extra. No, 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 no. We don't want to color outside the lines. It's okay. That means the culture is more safe. Let's play safe. Um, Everyone knows there are so many studies and so much proof that when you have a culture where you have a lot, like a melting pot, right, of different viewpoints, etc., the end result cannot be compared. It's like the size of the pie has increased. We learned this in negotiation in INSEAD, right? So increasing the size of the pie. Why not increase the size of the pie? So I'm not going to lecture on why it's important, but I think that um, a lot of recruiting comes from fear based mindset. And one of the reasons people do 12 rounds, 15 rounds of interviews in companies is they want to make sure this is the right person. What if the person leaves in less than 12 months? Oh my God, what a pain. And what if the person leaves at 13 months? We're going to have to hire another recruiting agency and headhunter and do all of that. My ass is on the line. Or, I'm going to look bad. So cover it up and play it safe, right? And then in that, the safe becomes people who look like us, sound like us, etc. So I think that managers who are interested in the outcome and almost blind to how you got to the outcome, obviously within reason, within your values, etc., those managers know the magic of what happens when you put people together who are who otherwise would not have come together. Totally different.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you one last question on this culture piece. One of the really kind of popular mechanisms in companies has been employee referrals, which is, of course, that if one of your employees recommends a person that they know, for many different reasons, that person is more likely to be successful in their organization. They're probably closer in terms of culture fit and so on. Of course, this can lead to not having a lot of culture add because people end up referring people who look like them. But what are your thoughts on employee referral programs, and how much do you use them in kind of sourcing the right candidates?
I've used them a lot. I've used them a lot. That's a very good question, actually, about the danger. As long as it's not your only source of recruiting, I think that's a really good place. There is a lot of data that shows that not only is it more effective as a channel, because firstly, I'm an employee, I refer my friend, I get a little bonus, right? I feel good. It makes me more sort of integrated in the company, more validated. And then the other good thing is that friend, the data shows that person lasts much longer. I don't know the exact numbers, much longer than from other sources. So it's actually a win-win. But if you're only going to say, like, we're only going to do referrals and we're not going to do any other way of recruiting, then you fall into the danger of, that echo chamber effect. So, just going back, Marilyn, to your previous question as well, I want to address this because one of the great descriptions I got from one of my podcast guests was the radiator and drain analogy, right? Now, when a person steps into the room, whether they are a referral or headhunted or just whatever, word of mouth or linkedin.com, indeed.com, you want more of radiators and you want less of drains. So the radiators are, it's just like that, on a cold winter's day, it's just warm. It No matter what, it's always bringing heat and warmth into the room, and people like to be around radiators. um the drain, we all know that person. He or she walks in, sucks out the energy of the room, and people are like wondering what's going on, like everybody's kind of like that. And so you want more of the radiator, and there are so many ways and interviews and make that person meet people, have a little performance, have them do a presentation, all of that stuff. You're like, nice person, not only intelligent, not only creative, but and that nice doesn't have to be like, oh, also went to the same school like I did, right? Or also knows John in Amazon. Can be totally different, but like, that person brings something that I think people care more and more about, that because at the end of the day, you want a people person. You want someone who's encouraging and motivating and is not a total douchebag, right? Yes, you want someone who knows what they're doing, but nobody wants to work with douchebags.
Couldn't agree more, for sure. No one would say that they would really like to work with a douchebag. So on that, I mean, I think what matters from the discussion on skill and culture is actually like a really nuanced perspective, right? Of course, skill is sometimes essential. You gave us examples of jobs where really there you cannot sacrifice skill. Like I was saying the same thing yesterday to Tala. I was like, well, I really don't want an incompetent pilot, like I'll take an asshole of a pilot, but maybe not an incompetent one. And so I think it's the answer is, as always, it depends. But I think it's important to keep both of those things in mind, and to make sure that you are asking about both of them. And I think maybe one question to close it off before we do the rapid fire What are your thoughts on having like a rating grid when you're interviewing? Like, how strict are you about saying, here are the 10 things we're looking for, be it on, across the HIPLASH, I love your acronyms. They're always amazing. Across that spectrum, like how much are you a fan of like, let's write down what we're looking for, what we're testing for, make sure everybody contributes their opinion. Like, how scientific do you get about this?
Personally, I've never done it. Never done it. It's because I've always felt that the best feedback has been qualitative. This is a personal thing. You'll have people who have solid reasons on why those grids and tables make sense. For me, it's like I'm interested in like the table, and then there was a little box for comment. What did they write in the comment? Like I'm very interested to learn that, because I feel like that little thing tells me more about the person than any other scientific equations.
I would tend to agree, and also like if you're grading over 10, a 7 for someone coming, like, let's say, from a French educational system is like a 10 for someone coming from the American educational system. So sometimes I find that it's if you are a multicultural company, then those grades don't really mean the same thing either.
Exactly. And you know how we measure intelligence, I think personally it's changing. It's more like on your feet thinking, street smart, as opposed to les grands écoles or the best schools in, engineering school in India. Who cares? At the end of the day, you want someone who can do a great job. And I think we're living in a very exciting time where people are starting to question this more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Sonal. And with that, we're coming to the end of our episode, sadly. I think you and I could stay here and talk for quite a while longer, but I'm going to take us to our rapid fire sequence. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so please complete my sentences with one or two or three words. The one thing that every team needs is
Trust.
trust. The
Trust.
one thing a team needs to avoid at all costs.
Gossip behind back.
That's such a good one. That's so true. That's
You
really
can
disruptive.
I can talk to you about Tala that I don't like something about her. I prefer that I do this in front of Tala.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think that's feedback,
Yeah,
It's not
and Tala, nothing against you. Huh?
a good team leader is,
A coach.
oh, that's a good one. And the best book on teams is?
Yeah, I okay. I don't know any, because I'll be frank here. There's these great books by these great leaders in big gigantic companies, and then you speak with employees in those companies and they feel like the reality is very different from what is in the book. So I don't believe in all of that. The one that I have to say I happen to be reading today, is 12 and a half by Gary Vee. And the
Mhm.
reason I like it is because he is one of the few leaders that actually says, shucks, like I messed up. I shouldn't have done this. So he talks about failures and what to do instead. So I like a more down to earth. And he talks about 12 and a half traits you need to be a successful leader, employee, big brother, big sister, business owner, whatever. So I'm finding those stories fascinating for now.
Fair enough. There you go. And then I know you don't have a team, but what would be your favorite team ritual?
Okay, so my team is I, me, myself. I've got multiple personalities in my head. And I use this ritual, whether it's me showing up to a live stream like this, or whether my client who I help when they're preparing for a very like high stakes meeting, and that is just have a little bottle of perfume next to your laptop. I know that sounds ridiculous. There is something that happens, it elevates your complete mood. You show up happier. Everyone is like, wow, what's going on? We're getting great results. For me, it's the air I breathe, and if I can scent it a little bit and
I don't know
Chanel
if
it a
you
little
saw,
bit, then
I was showing you that mine is right here. And I
I love that.
definitely share that ritual with you. I think it's just that there's always some kind of thing that you do before you walk into an important meeting, a moment where you have to animate, facilitate, coach, talk, make a decision, negotiate. A lot of it before could have been about like what you're wearing. A lot of it for me when I was in an office was which shoes I was wearing that day. Because like
Okay.
I tend to prefer comfort a lot, but every once in a while I need like a power show.
Yes.
And now that I'm remote and that nobody can see the rest of me, perfume has played such a big role. So it's really funny.
And I know some people will be like, candle or whatever. I want that to be, it's different, right? For me, I want it on me, and it just like
Yeah.
elevates my entire
It
vibe.
empowers me. I get it completely. So now thank you so much for joining us and for sharing, your perspective with like hundreds of thousands of recruitments under your belt. It was really helpful, and I'm sure our audience has benefit from that. A thank you to our audience as well. There's a few comments we couldn't get to, but maybe Sonal and I can come to them after the episode and answer them on LinkedIn directly. As always, the video is available forever. So if you think someone you know could benefit from it, you can share this link with them. It'll be there waiting for them to watch it. Later on, we'll share it as an article and on YouTube and on our website. And speaking of our website, of course, we are always creating posts and article. One that's coming up is our team's favorite recipe for the holidays. So maybe that'll inspire you. Speaking of diversity, I think we're going to have a very diverse menu. But go ahead and check out our website, cosmiccentaurs.com, and you can follow us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube, or you can just subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll make sure you don't miss out on any of our important content. And then one last, thing before we let you guys go, mark your calendars, because we are going to be taking a break for the holidays. So we won't see you until next year. So for all of you who are tuning in today, we wish you very happy holidays, and we hope that you're able to reunite with your families and take a break and reflect on this madness of a year. And we'll be right back here on Thursday, January 6th at the same time as today, 3:30 p.m. UAE time, and I'll be hosting Chase Warrington, who's the head of remote at Doist, and we'll discuss how to build a remote first team. And I do hope to see all of you there. And Sonal, once more, thank you so much for joining us on this last episode of 2021.
Thank you so much for having me, and you're doing such great work. I'm so proud of you and your team, and all the best.
Thank you. We're so grateful. All right, I'll be signing us out.